Hello again, welcome back. And this session will be in English. And I'm very happy to welcome James on the main stage today. James Barton. Hello, welcome.
Name would be a better way of putting that. Larry, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, James?
I'm fine, thank you. Although in much less glamorous settings than you are right now.
I wouldn't say so. Look at that library at the back.
There you go. There was a thing during lockdown. There was a main piece on the news over here, how everyone ordered books in order to have a bookshelf and a library behind them for conference calls. And I just thought I'd carry on with that tradition and do it for this presentation today.
Yes, well done. So it's not a virtual background of books, then they're real thing.
You can actually go and take one off the shelf and bring it forward. There you go. That's
brilliant.
That's how true to life I decided to make this for you.
Well, listen, it's so good to have you on the show, quote unquote. But we've had two. One day yesterday was a fantastic day one of all of this event. We've had great speakers, and some of the sessions were in English, some of them were in Russian. So I think we agreed we're going to have your session without translation. So it is a truly motivational, hopefully motivational experience for all those listening.
Well, absolutely. It will be pure English because my Russian is still very much in the baby step stage of trying to learn. So it will be purely English. I will try and go as slow as possible. If I go a little bit fast, just please slow me down. Can I ask this as well? Just because of the way I like to do presentations in general, if anyone has questions as we go, you don't need to wait till the end. Throw them as we go through. It's always best having everything interactive, as it were. Blending between seeing me and my bookshelf and onto a little presentation as well.
So can I just ask, can you see the chat? Are you able to see the chat, or?
I can see the chat at this moment in time, yes. Although I believe when I go onto the presentation side of things, then I may lose it. But that's
all right. So maybe I will jump in if we have any questions during your talk. You can, then maybe I can voice them to you. But the floor is yours then. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to everyone. Live from my library, as Valeria just said just before. Essentially, I've got 40 minutes probably to tell you something that you already know, and I'll tell you why you already know it in just a moment. But what's very strange, and I've always found this very odd nowadays, is we live in this social media world, and yet we're getting worse at actually being able to tell stories. No one likes talking about themselves. And yet you are your greatest story. You are your greatest commodity in itself. Now, the reason why you already know all of this is because you have been a child. And that's exactly where I want you to start. Throughout this entire talk, presentation, call it what you will, I want you to remember what it was like to be a child. And in just a moment, I'll tell you why I feel I'm qualified to actually be able to talk to you about this. But first, let me just tell you a little story. It's quite a famous story. It comes from something called the Reader's Digest over here, which is a magazine, and it's about a 7-year-old girl, and she sat at the back of her class in primary school, and her teacher notices that she sat on her own, and she walks to the back and she says, "What are you doing?" And the little girl says, "Well, I'm drawing." And the teacher said, "But what are you drawing?" And the girl thought about it for a moment, and she looked up and she said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher, with a little smile on her face, said, but no one knows what God looks like." And the little girl turned around and she said, "Well, they will do in a minute if you actually leave me to draw it." And it's a beautiful, beautiful little story. Presumably absolutely true because it comes from a magazine. But it's a beautiful little story because what it neatly does is encapsulates the imagination of a child. And the imagination of a child is so powerful. It's the time in all of our lives when, one, we actually told good stories, we lived in stories, and two, if you can't remember what it was like to be a child, imagine what it's like to actually now tell a story to a child. You never just sit there and read a story very cold and very boring. You put character into it, you put imagination into it, you put tone into it, you be expressive. Why? Because it's about firing the imagination of a child. And that's not a bad thing for us to want to bring back in nowadays. We're all just too resistant to the idea of having this imagination. So something for you. I want you to firstly imagine back to when you were a child and imagine which story you grew up with. For me, it was Peter Pan. All boys except one grew up, probably still Peter Pan today, but Peter Pan was my story growing up. And secondly, and I did this with an audience not long ago, I want you to remember who you wanted to be. Was it a Disney princess? Was it a character from Star Wars? Was it, I don't know, it could have been anyone else within there. Was it Dick Van Dyke? It could have been absolutely any character from TV, cinema, whatever it was. Imagine who you were and just keep it in your mind, and keep it in your mind throughout this entire session that we've got here. Let me tell you my story. My story, I didn't know what I wanted to be growing up. I don't think anyone really ever does up until a certain point, because we have too much pressure from the outside. Our parents tell us one thing, our schools tell us another, maybe consultants tell us something else. You need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be an engineer. Everything has to say job. And for ages, I had people going lawyer, 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 all of this at me. And I didn't know what I wanted to be, except I did. I knew that I wanted to be one thing, and that one thing was Indiana Jones. I absolutely knew I wanted to be Indiana Jones. Now, I have no problem in distinguishing between films and real life, but I really wanted to be an archaeologist. So I went to university and I studied ancient history, I studied archaeology, I studied classical civilizations, so the stories, the myths, the legends, and all of this. And it was while I was at university that I discovered actually archaeology isn't actually that interesting. And I never wanted to be an archaeologist. I just wanted to pretend to be an archaeologist. And I found a love in telling the stories of the ancient world, of hearing them, listening them. And therefore, when I left, I went both into education and the film industry. So nowadays, I am blending education with actually the telling of stories through the media as well. And that's why I want to connect to you today, because crossing connections and helping you to be able to tell stories gets you further with universities, it gets you further in the job market, and it helps you know more about yourself as well. Okay. Why is it important to tell stories? Because in every sense, facts are very hard to retain in your mind. It's only when you have a story that goes with them that we have something to pin those facts onto. So we want to create a story, a narrative around something. And I actually do a bit of training with people doing selling in sales jobs in the city, things like that. And what we try and do is get people to understand that if you just quote stats or numbers or figures at somebody, people don't actually listen. They switch off. Your brain contains about 30 seconds worth of facts, and after that, no one's interested. So what we need to do is start layering that up with a bit of a story, something that we can tell around it. And the same as you. You are your commodity, and we'll come to that. There's another really interesting exercise that you can do in the fact that you learn more about yourself when you lie about yourself. Very strange thing to say, but there's a great game. It's called the 5 questions game, and play it with someone at some point. But the one job the person has, one person will be asking 5 questions. The person answering, the one job they have is to give a lie for every answer that they have. They can never actually tell the truth. What does that do? Number one, it tells you more about yourself, because you're now thinking about yourself, but working out how to tell you something different within there. Number two, it boosts your creativity, that creative mindset that you've got, because we need you to be creative in order to tell a good story. And number three, it's actually much, much harder than it actually looks. Okay, now what I want to do, hopefully this will work. If it does, fantastic. If it doesn't, then I am a complete novice at technology. But Valeria, perhaps you can just confirm that you can see that for me. So I've got some knowledge that it's working.
Guys, yeah. So it's on.
Lovely. Okay. So for me, everything in telling stories is the art of communication. And the art of communication is about simplification. And at the end of all of this, what I'd like everyone to be able to do, not to me now, but I'd like everyone to be able to deliver a 1-minute teach. It's like your elevator pitch, whereby you'll be able to teach someone something within 1 minute. And right now, with a piece of paper and a pen, I'd like you to make a note of what you think you could teach someone in 1 minute if you had to in 30 minutes time. And this is an exercise we often use with people in team building challenges. Okay, but for now, we need to wake up your creativity. So here's a question for you. How can you put 10 coins into 3 glasses so that each glass contains an odd number of coins? Creative exercises are brilliant in order to get people starting to think about how to find your voice and how to tell stories, because we need you to start thinking creatively. So you may or may not have an answer for this. Because of the way that this presentation works, maybe just jot down the answer next to you or write the question down. But 10 coins into 3 glasses so that each glass contains an odd number of coins. I'll just give you 10 seconds to be able to see whether you can do that. I love using exercises because exercises keep you on your toes. Another really great way of trying to fire up imagination is with everything you do to constantly change the location that you're in. Okay, so never just stay in one place for longer than 10-15 minutes at a time when you're trying to write something, when you're trying to write a story, because something else will always give you something else. It's about not allowing your body to relax. So here's your answer. Okay, I'm sure someone out of there would have got it. Someone would be absolutely on the money for us today. But it's about being creative with what you've got in front of you. Sometimes if you can't see the answer, you've got to find a creative solution to it. And when we're trying to sell you to universities, when we're trying to sell you into the job market, nothing is straightforward. Everything in life worth having is worth the effort to find the answer. Okay, so now we're all fired up. Do something else for me. Think of a number, think of any number, then double it. I want you to add 9 to that result you've got, take away 3, then divide it by 2, and then subtract the number with the first number you started with. Okay, think of a number, double it, add 9, take away 3, divide it by 2, and then take away the first number to that number that you've got here. And then hopefully, universally, everyone will have come up with this number here, the number 3. Okay. With stories, sometimes the idea is that the end result is always the same, but that tends to frighten people a little bit, because if the end result is always the same, how can you ever be different? But often it's more about the journey itself. So let me demystify something for you. I'm obsessed with this idea that there is no such thing as an original story. We retell stories 1,000,001 different ways, but there is no way anymore of having a truly original idea. But originality is not what we're going for. We're going for the idea of being unique within there. Let me come at it from a film approach for you and a classics approach. You had Zeus, king of the gods, okay? Zeus, king of the gods. And nowadays you have Thor, okay? The idea is we are always using and recycling imagery and imagination. You can even see the recycling of the imagery that comes through. All your Marvel superheroes are based upon someone, or even DC if someone's going to be correct about this. Poseidon becomes Aquaman. Athena becomes Wonder Woman. Even the story of Batman and Superman isn't a truly unique story. It's not a truly original story, I should say. It is a parable, so a retelling of the story of Jesus Christ, okay? Superman, son sent down to earth in order to save mankind, dies for mankind. Batman is the antithesis of that. These are stories that we know, we love, we're just recycling them for successive generations. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your job. Your job is to take a story that is about you, doesn't matter if it's similar to someone else's, but to make it personal to you and to make it relatable to the audience who's going to want to listen to it. You may be amazed to know that every single story in literary history, in movie history, they all fall into one of these 6 categories, okay? Do it as an example for yourself. Think of a film and then match it up to the categories there. You've got rags to riches, where you rise from bad to good fortune. You've got riches to rags, where you fall from being good to bad, and it's more a tragic story. This idea of the myth of Icarus flying too close to the sun. So a rise and then a fall. Oedipus, a fall, a rise, a fall again, because he marries his mum, kills his dad, etc., etc. Cinderella, man and hold, these are all categories that things fall into, but never fear that. In fact, every story, every movie is based upon this wheel here. It's called the hero's journey. Everything has the same arc, the same story arc that goes through it. Why? Because it is a story that isn't broken, so don't bother trying to fix it. Just follow the code that is there, even if the end result is always the same. I saw this and I absolutely loved it, although it's a bit naughty. If you know the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you have this idea of Daddy Bear, Mummy Bear, Baby Bear going in and saying, who's been sleeping in my bed? Who's been sleeping in my bed? Who's been sleeping in my bed? And I saw a cartoon about it the other day, and it changes the story just a little bit. So you've got Daddy Bear who's sleeping in his bed, Mummy Bear who's sleeping in his bed, Baby Bear who starts questioning why someone's been sleeping in his bed when it suddenly twigs that Mummy and Daddy Bear don't sleep in the same bed anymore. It rather destroys children's nursery rhymes for you here, but what it does is it's a modern retelling of a story, and it's fascinating how many different ways you can tell a story just to make it more unique. If you get the chance, and it's not a difficult English book at all, this, but it's a great book by a French writer called Raymond Queneau. It's called The Exercises in Style, and it takes a really simple story about a man on a bus who gets a little bit too close to another man, and he pulls off a button off his jacket. And then the book moves to a scene in a square, and he's having a chat with a friend, and the friend turns to him and says, you need to get another button sewn onto your jacket. That is it. Very, very short story. But in this book, they retell the story in 99 different ways. The same story, but by changing the pitch, the tone, the implication, the intonation, all of these different things changes the way a story actually comes across. So we are trying to help you find your voice, and a book like this is absolutely perfect for that exercise. What does a good story need? Well, it needs an exciting beginning, doesn't it? It needs an interesting plot. It needs fascinating characters. It's got to have some pace. It's got to have some flow. More importantly than anything, it's got to have a good ending that leaves the audience happy and wanting more, and that they are never disappointed. So during this presentation, would you please do me a favor? I want you to write a 3-line story, and I want you to write your first line to it now. Just one sentence per paragraph. So you've got 3 sentences at the end. You've got a character. Your character is going to be a biology teacher. The setting is the supermarket, and the problem that you've got is that you found a rat. Okay, so you have 3 sentences to tell this story. The character is a biology teacher, the setting is a supermarket, and the problem is that you have found a rat. Okay, I would like you just to write the first sentence, do that now, and I'll tell you when to write the other ones as we go, but please keep doing this as I talk to you. Okay. There's a lovely little article in the Harvard Business Review about how it is you should tell a good story in business. And actually, it's lovely because it works in every level for everything, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, whether you're in business, or whether you're trying to write a book yourself. Okay? You need to start with a message. The message is you. What is this story? What is this message you want to get across? If you're going for university, what is it you want the university to know about you? If you're going for a job, what is it that you can bring to that company that no one else can? If you're selling to somebody, what is it about this product that makes it so different from any other product that someone could buy? Using your own experiences makes that story more relatable, because the moment you actually connect with a person, it makes it more interesting. Don't make yourself a hero. Always just make yourself the central character. The hero is your audience. You want your audience to feel better about reading this story. Maybe highlighting a struggle is always good, where you overcome adversity. We'll look at all these things, but keep it simple and then practice the delivery of your story, because delivery in storytelling and finding your voice is absolutely everything. When you're talking about yourself, you only really have one job. The idea, and it comes from a drama-based exercise, but the idea is to say yes to everything, okay? We're not talking silly things here. We're saying, say yes to everything. Be open, be receptive to ideas. Never say no. Never block an idea that comes through, because no is the end of a sentence. If you put something negative or no into a personal statement, that statement can't go anywhere. If you do it in an interview, the interviewer has no way of asking you any more questions. So it is about being open and receptive and finding more creative ways to connect with your audience. People get very hung up on saying, I'm not creative. I don't know how to be creative. Well, we have this thing called left-brained and right-brained, if you've ever come across that. The left brain deals with words, it deals with numbers, it deals with logic, whereas the right brain is dealing with the colors, the shapes, the rhythm, okay? Different things. But in order to be creative, you don't need to be left-brained or right-brained, you need to be both. So we need to be receptive to all the ideas coming through. People often use this term, thinking outside the box. I absolutely hate that. I hate this idea of think outside the box or blue sky thinking, because it's too big. It makes the problem far too large. Rather, I want to tell you to think inside the box. Sometimes we call it the box strategy, but think inside the box. And when you're thinking inside the box, what that means is that you have a clear set of rules, guidelines, you know what it is you're doing, therefore you can write accordingly. Actually, the great example to this actually comes from Apollo 13, and I promise to always use stories and movies for this talk. But if you've seen Apollo 13 or you know the story, it's the story of the space shuttle that goes up into space, and while they're there, the oxygen tanks blow. It's an absolutely true story, and Hollywood made it into a film starring obviously Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon within there. So we have a film and we have a story of the space shuttle in space and the oxygen tanks have blown. In order to actually fix that, what they have to do is they have a team on the ground who are communicating up to the spaceship in space about how to fix this particular problem. Now, if you're thinking outside the box, you'll be doing anything. You'll be putting in place different pipes. You'll be fixing it in different ways. Whereas the problem that they've got is they can only use the material that they would have on the spaceship. So now you're thinking inside the box. So the team on the ground is using the equipment that they know they have in space inside the box, and therefore they are fixing the problem much easier because they are only using what they know they have and not having to try and create something that they don't have. And this idea of thinking outside the box when you tell stories is too big. And it stops people from writing good personal statements. It stops people doing well in interviews because you're trying to make the problem too large. Always remember your creative side of a child. Now I want you to write the second sentence to your story. So the second sentence of this 3-line story, remember you have a biology teacher, you're in a supermarket, and the problem is that you found a rat. So this is the middle part. Okay, start, middle, and end. This is the middle part. As we go on, the problem for a lot of people when you're writing stories and finding your voice is actually knowing where to start. Never fear the end. Always start at the end if you don't know how to start a story. It's often the best place to start, particularly in university application terms, because if you know the end goal, you know what you want, then all we have to do is work out how to try and achieve it. So the end works perfectly. When you're choosing subjects for schools, start knowing what you want to do at university. When you're writing a personal statement for university, start by summarizing to the university exactly why they should take you. And then we can go back and find creative ways of starting. But never fear the end if you don't know how to start something. The question for everyone, though, that I need you to answer is, who are you? Really? I need you to think creatively. Love using this example. It's still used in the city. It does come from The Wolf of Wall Street as a film, but the film uses it in an incorrect fashion. Okay. The actual trick to this particular exercise is very simple. Sell me this pen, sell me this ruler. Okay. The basic person out there will just start telling anyone and everything about this pen. It writes, it's grey, it's metal. You're never going to find another pen like it. It makes very judgmental, very superficial comments about the pen. The slightly better person out there will start being more creative, and maybe they'll start now telling a story about the pen. Lady Gaga uses this pen. Now we've got some sort of association with it, and that will sell to a certain number of people because we've given it a story. We've given it a background. But now for the best storytellers out there and finding your voice for universities and jobs, the best person is the person who forgets about the pen and actually talks to the person directly. Who are they? What's their name? Where do they come from? What's their background? What do they do for a job? Okay, what do they like to do on weekends? They have a conversation. They build a dialogue. And once you've built a dialogue, then you know exactly how to sell that pen back to that person. Or you realize that person doesn't need the pen, and therefore you won't waste your time by trying to sell yourself to, or sell the pen to that person. You, in this example, are the pen. You are the commodity. With universities, with jobs, you need to work out what an employer or a university wants from you first, and then you make the story relevant to them. You make them the hero of your story. Okay, you then make it relatable to them. You then find that story, that narrative from you that sells you across. But you need to do your research first. You need to talk to the person. Okay. There was a study at Harvard University that showed that sharing experiences about ourselves is very rewarding. Okay, we spend about 30 to 40% of our speech pattern generally talking about ourselves. You just got to make it relatable to somebody now. Actually a really interesting drama game that you can do with something like that. When you're trying to fire up creativity as well, pretend it's not a pen. This isn't a pen, it's a telephone. This isn't a pen, it's a shoe. This isn't a pen, it's a hat. It's going back to that lie game again, but it's trying to find creative things in a fast, rapid way to try and fire the creative side of your brain. Okay. Have a little look through this. Work out who you are, and then work out exactly what you want to do with it. If you're sporty, then we need to find different ways of connecting with you. How can we make something more creative? Well, if you're a sporty person, I actually quite like to take people out and play sport with them, play tennis with them, play squash with them, play golf with them, and write this in a conversational way as we go round, okay? Same works in music, same works in drama. If you do an exercise whilst you're writing, the creativity can actually lend itself to the story that you're doing there. All right. There are numerous exercises that you can actually look. Mind maps are actually quite a strong way of finding your voice and telling stories. So every time you think of something, write it down, and it's quite interesting to see how your brain looks on the piece of paper as you go through. Start from the middle, start from that message you want to get across, that end goal, and then connect lines off it with different things that you're thinking of at that moment in time. Doesn't matter what this story looks like at this moment. It's just the story is on the paper in front of you. We will then find the way of actually doing that. That works for some people. What works for other people is drawing. Drawing is a fantastic thing. Draw half a picture, okay, and then try and complete the picture with something different. Look at glasses half full and half empty, okay. Come up with a positive and a negative way of looking at things. Come up with random word associations. So just find specific words. You know you want to be a banker. So find the words that associate with being a banker: finance, money, stock market, venture capitalism, all of these words. And then what I want you to do with the random words is create a story around those that uses all of those words in there. So random word connections that you have. Another lovely exercise that you can do when finding your voice is to take this often works with people, but it works with games as well. If you take a word like finance or money, and then you take another word such as, I don't know, house or car, and then find a way of linking those together via as many different routes as you like, via as many different words, but finding creative ways of linking things together within there. All of these help you find your own narrative, but more, they're helping you find your storytelling aspect. The STAR exercise is another great one that you can do here, and you can do it at any point. You find a situation, you find a task, you find an action, and you find a result. Okay, so you introduce the situation to the employer or the university, and you set the context. Then you describe the task that you had to complete and whether there were any challenges that you had to overcome as a result of it. What actions did you take as part of the task, and what actions did you take in order to overcome the difficulty, and the end result that you came up with at the end? All of these things you can be doing throughout the course of both school, university, in your future. I do it still as an exercise for myself all the time, where you have a notebook with you, a bit like a journal, and all the time you're just writing down situations that you've been part of, how you've actually dealt with them, and what the end result is. Not just because they're great and they show you how good you are, but also what you've learned from the difficulties that you found out along the way. Find a friend, buddy up, talk to as many people as possible. Ask them to tell you what it is that your voice is like when they hear it, okay? Ask yourself to come up with 5 things that you think about yourself, and then ask a friend to come up with 5 things as well, and to see if they have exactly the same things there. But always question yourself when you're writing. Question whether you enjoy writing about something. Question whether you're interested. Write something down, then read it out loud. Hear it back. Hear whether it's still interesting and whether you would want to read that. Give it to someone else and ask them if it's interesting. Have this constant self-analysis and reflection along the way, because it's useful in helping you find your voice all the way through. Do you know what you're talking about? Then you can try these exercises, which are lovely as well. Come up with someone relevant in the modern world. So take a music artist, for example, take Dua Lipa, and write down some sort of guide to future artists as to what it is in a step-by-step fashion to being famous. Or if we go back to the superhero analysis, why not write a piece as Superman, explaining to comic book fans out there at Comic-Con why he's a better superhero than Batman? Why do these have any relevance to what we're talking about? Because they're forcing you to be creative in your storytelling. And just to try and bring the point full circle for you here, we want you to be as creative as you can, because the more you tell a story to university, a true story, the more you tell a story to an employer, a true story, the more you sell a product with a story, the more likely you are to succeed. Now I'd like you just to write your 3rd sentence in there as well. Absorb everything. Remember, you're a sponge. Absorb social media, watch TED Talks, read as much as you can, watch on the internet, listen to people. You find your voice more in listening to other people than, bizarrely enough, than you do in yourself, okay? Other people will guide you on what your voice is, subconsciously or unconsciously within it. The power of social media nowadays is enormous. We are telling stories through images. TikTok, that lockdown revolution, tells stories, albeit very silly ones, but it tells stories within that. And social media really brings structure into our lives in a very strange way. It has the ability to influence us and to empower us. We're looking at university applications specifically. One thing I really like people to do when finding your voice and telling stories is to imagine your statements, and to imagine anything you do, your job applications, as a representation of your human body, okay? The human body, the human brain makes very superficial judgments from the moment it first sees someone. It makes a judgment as to whether it finds that person attractive, whether it doesn't, but it makes a judgment based upon the way they look. Only when that person opens their mouth does it then color in the picture. And that's where we call the body of the piece. You then separate it into the legs and the feet. And as you go down, you're trying to put in different aspects. And I'll show you how it works a little bit here. If you're looking at a personal statement, we look to the story that you tell with an introduction. So something that's the hook, what's going to pull in your audience to start with. The body is the education, everything you've done in your life that's taken you to this point through education. The legs, so we call it the legwork, the effort that you put in comes through those legs themselves. And anything else that you feel is relevant that you want to tell people, like your sporting or your Olympiads or whatever, comes in simply the shape of your feet. Okay, so something a little bit smaller with a description underneath that really just encapsulates what this person actually looks like. It comes from a child's game whereby you draw the body itself, but then you fold the drawing over at different points of the body, so you can't actually see what the bit you're drawing is below. And in some bizarre way, that is the same as actually telling a university application or writing a job application, because you're writing it in separate steps each time. Don't fear that. embrace it, enjoy it, but look at it as a representation of a human body, because then, like a human body, it will all knit together at the end, and we'll find the flow and structure that goes through it. Challenge yourself by always saying, and so what? Every time you write something, make sure it has value. Someone is paying for this. Someone is wanting to see it. At the end of each sentence, make sure you can justify why it is you've said that. Make sure that you've got a friend who can always say, and so what? And if you can't justify why you've written something in a university application or in a job application, get it out of there. You don't have the words, it has no value. And what else? The other thing I would just like people to try and do as well is pick a topic. Pick a topic, give a topic to a friend, and actually try and talk them through it. So something that's relevant to you that isn't relevant to someone else, i.e. your parents. Maybe you want to talk them through economics. Maybe you want to talk them through Shakespeare, something like that. But pick a topic and work very hard to explain it to someone who has absolutely no idea. If you can do that, then you found your narrative voice, okay? If you can simplify a teaching topic and teach it to someone else who has no knowledge of that topic so that they understand it, that is the equivalent of writing your applications for jobs and for university. You need to treat people almost as basic, as beginners, not as idiots, but as beginners' guides to this. Never assume that someone knows something else. And then just in our final 2 minutes, I will say this. I gave you a 1 minute each idea. Sorry, beg your pardon?
Sorry, literally 1 minute. Sorry.
There you go. I've literally got it down to the final 1 minute teach. Hopefully, everyone will be able to do a 1 minute teach to everyone at home. And it's something I really want people to try as an exercise. I'm going to do this with you very quickly. Grab your paper, grab your pen. I'm going to teach you how to draw a cartoon using only letters and numbers in the time that you have, okay? I'm going to start you with drawing a number C, or a letter C, I should say. I'd then like you to put in 2 sixes in this way here, okay? And to color in those 2 sixes. I'd then like you to use the number 3 to position as an ear. I'd then like you to use the letter J and position as a mouth. I'd then like you to use the letter V and to position as a neck. I'd then like you to use the letter I and use it as your hair and your neckline. And then ultimately what you have in under a minute is this idea of being able to draw a cartoon only using letters and numbers. Why? Because if you can simplify an idea down to the extent that you can teach someone in a minute, then you've found your narrative voice and you know how you can tell a story effectively. Valeria, I'll come back to you just because now I'm very appreciative you're right at the end of your time.
James, this was very inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm very happy that we've streamed it actually to our Facebook page, you guys. If you haven't been able to be here for the whole of the session, it's going to be up on Facebook and Business Link's YouTube channel as well. So you can revisit it and watch again. That was really great. I just want to show you here, talking about real books. You might recognize this. This here says James Barton on physiotherapy. So these are getting into guides, getting into different universities. And James has been with MPW, which is a great organization also in education, helping people get into universities for many years. And he's author of many of these guides. So not only the storyteller, but also some great books. So I just want to finish off by saying everyone watching this, James is helping, he's able to help you get into the very top level courses, medicine, engineering, something that is maybe a little bit more difficult than what it may seem to in the beginning anyway. So if you need to get in touch with James, you can do it directly or through us. And if you'd like us to add James to the chat, let us know, and I can maybe pass questions on to him afterwards. So it's been great having you. Sorry for the time constraints. We do have the next session in 1 minute. So.
Yeah, look, enjoy it. It's always dangerous giving me a platform and allowing me to speak, Valeria. So look, good luck with the rest of the event. Real pleasure to virtually meet people and speak soon.
Speak soon, James. Thank you. А я сейчас передам нашу студию моим коллегам Елене и Юле, которые поприветствуют наших студентов из Великобритании, и следующую сессию проведут уже они. Буквально через минутку. Как всегда, не переключайтесь, ребят.